Hello, dear listener. Have you ever felt that a well-known story has a hidden layer waiting just beneath the surface? That is the world we will explore together on this channel. Welcome to a space where we give classic tales a second life. We will take stories from our shared cultural heritage, fairy tales, parables, historical events, and view them through a modern, thoughtful lens. This is not just about retelling, it's about rediscovery. We'll uncover the deeper lessons about human nature, society, and wisdom that have been there all along, transforming simple narratives into tools for cultivating our imagination, education, and cultural awareness. And today, we step away from the bustling streets of Dickensian London into the profound silence of a snow-clad forest. We leave behind stories of loud redemption for a tale of quiet awakening. Tonight's story is a peaceful one, designed for the evening hours, a tale to unwind with. It takes a single poignant idea from Andersen, the longing of a little fir-tree, and weaves it into an original winter parable. We call it The Fir and the Forest Spirit, a winter tale for a weary soul. This is a story of two unlikely companions, a young tree trembling with a feeling of insignificance and an ancient, gentle guardian woven from the very essence of the winter woods. There is no villain here, no great quest, only a quiet conversation between a soul that feels lost and the wisdom that was always surrounding it. It asks a question we so often ignore in the noise of our daily lives. What if the peace we search for is not a distant place to reach, but a truth to remember right where we stand? So, let this be a moment of rest. Dim the lights, settle in, and let the world outside fade away. Allow yourself to be transported to a forest where the greatest discovery is not in changing who you are, but in finally seeing your own inherent worth. If this path of quiet discovery calls to you, be sure to subscribe and join our community of thoughtful listeners. And if you know someone who needs a moment of peaceful reflection, please share this story with them. I can't wait to share this quiet magic with you. Chapter 1. The Disquiet in the Silence. Imagine silence. Not an empty one, but a saturated one. A silence in which you can hear the snow settling on a branch, the old bark cracking with frost, your own heart beating a little slower, in sync with the sleeping earth. This is not just a forest. It is an entire world immersed in winter's slumber. And in the very heart of this world, in a small clearing by a frozen stream, stood a fir. She was perfect, if only she could have understood it. Every one of her needles, a carved emerald, dusted with diamond powder, every branch an elegant curve, frozen in a mute ballet. She was a miracle that did not know it was a miracle. But her world was turned outward, and it told her only one thing. Look at what you are not. She saw the ancient oak across the stream, its bare branches like a map of rivers against the sky, holding centuries in its rings. It spoke of endurance, of time measured in epochs, not seasons. And she, with her soft green youth, felt like a footnote to its story present perhaps, but not yet meaningful. She saw the pines, the titans whose peaks were lost in the low winter clouds. Their bark was scarred by storms, and in that was their proud history. Her bark was smooth, unmarked. I am not strong enough, she thought. They wore their battles like medals. She wore her peace like a child's dress, lovely but untested. She saw a flock of waxwings like rubies thrown into the sky, carried beyond the horizon to lands unknown to her. "I'm not free enough," she whispered to the wind. But the wind only took her words, bringing no answer. Their journey was written in the air. Hers was written in the soil, a single immovable dot. And then there were the stars on clear nights. They were the cruelest comparison. They didn't just shine, they belonged. They were part of constellations, vast patterns that told stories to the whole world. She stood alone. Her beauty was singular, and in that singularity, she felt a profound loneliness. What is a single note without a melody? Her disquiet was not loud. It did not scream. It accumulated, like the first snowfall with one weightless, almost invisible snowflake, then another, then 100, until it became hard to breathe. It was the quiet agony of comparison. It wasn't envy, not really. It was the haunting sense that the world had a grand design, a choir of roles that protect her oak, the sky-reaching pine, the wandering bird, and she had been placed in the clearing without a sheet of music. Was she meant to just be? And if so, was just being ever enough? It was not self-hatred. It was a longing for a role, a feeling that your existence is a beautiful but accidental detail in someone else's grand landscape. A masterpiece of nature, perhaps, but one hanging in a gallery where everyone else seemed to understand the artist's intention except for the masterpiece itself. And then came the real blizzard. The very snow that made the forest magical for her turned into a cold, indifferent weight. It lay on her shoulders, not choosing, not asking. It just was. A physical proof of her immutability. She was tied to this place, imprisoned in her own beauty. Each new layer of snow felt like another page in a book she couldn't write, a story happening to her, not by her. And on that night, under the howl of the wind, she asked the universe a question, quiet, desperate, childlike. Why am I here? What is my note in the song? And here a question arises, one that might be familiar to you too. Have you ever felt like this Fir, surrounded by the beauty of the world, by friends, opportunities, even comfort, yet somehow feeling separate from it? As if you're watching the feast of life through a window, your breath fogging the glass, having everything for happiness in theory, but looking somewhere into the distance at the curated highlights of others, thinking that it is there that some secret lies, some right path, that you, for some reason, have missed. The path of the oak, the pine, the bird, any path but your own uncharted clearing. A feeling that life is passing by while you are stuck, anchored in place by work, by obligations, or simply by this strange, unspoken sense that you are not in the right place and not the right person. That you are, in some fundamental way, waiting for permission to begin your own story. If this quiet question resonates within you, stay with us. Because the answer our fir will find does not lie in becoming taller than the pines or flying away with the waxwings. It is much closer and far more beautiful. The story is only beginning. Chapter 2. The Guest from Within the World. If you're just joining us, welcome. A brief word on what we do here. This channel is a space for slow stories with hidden depths. We take the familiar myths, fairy tales, parables, and look for what they quietly tell us about being human, about the parts of ourselves we often overlook. Tonight, it's a winter tale, a story about a young fir-tree in a silent forest who, like many of us, felt lost in plain sight, who asked, "What is my place?" And in the previous chapter, we left her in the heart of a blizzard with that question hanging in the frozen air. This is where her story truly begins, not with an answer, but with a different kind of question, one posed not by words, but by presence itself. The blizzard passed, leaving the forest buried under a blanket of pristine white. The silence returned, but it was a different silence now. It was waiting. The fir stood exhausted. The weight of the snow was also the weight of her own thoughts. She felt more invisible than ever, a mere shape in a monochrome world. And then something changed. It wasn't a sound. It was a cessation of sound. The faint whisper of the wind died. The occasional creak of a branch ceased. The forest held its breath. The air before her, still and cold, began to ripple, not like water, but like heat over a stone on a summer day. The very light seemed to bend, to gather. From this disturbance in the fabric of the clearing, a form began to coalesce. It was not born, it manifested. It drew itself from the surroundings, from the blue shadow pooled at the base of the pine, from the silver glitter of hoarfrost on a fern, from the deep violet of the pre-dawn sky caught in an ice lens. This was the forest spirit. To call it an old man would be to misunderstand it completely. It had no beard, no twinkling eyes, no sack of gifts. It was the consciousness of the place given shape. A pillar of tranquil awareness. Its form was fluid, semi-transparent, at one moment suggesting the stature of a great stag, at another the spreading crown of an ancient tree, and at yet another simply a standing vortex of gently swirling snow mist. And where a face might be, there were only 2 points of stable, gentle light. Not eyes that looked, but focal points that perceived. They held no judgment, only profound, patient attention. It had turned its perception toward the fir. The fir felt no fear, only a stunned, quiet awe. The immense loneliness she had felt moments before was now met with an even more immense company. The spirit did not speak, not with a voice. Instead, a thought formed in the clear space of the fir's awareness, as if it had always been her own, but she was only now hearing it. You asked for a reason. Look lower. The command was not harsh. It was an invitation, a redirection. Confused, the fir turned her attention downward, away from the distant peaks of the pines she envied, away from the empty sky. She looked to where her lowest, snow-laden branches swept the ground, and she saw the intricate lace-like tracks of field mice that formed a busy crossroads between her roots. She saw the deep, soft hollow where a hare had slept, warmed by the shelter of her boughs and the heat of her own living wood. She saw the bright red caps of hardy winter mushrooms feeding on the rich decay of her own fallen needles, a cycle of life and death happening in her shadow. The thought voice came again, softer. You asked for a purpose. Listen closer. She stilled her own yearning and listened. Beneath the silence, she heard it. The faint, almost imperceptible hum of the vast fungal network, the mycelium that connected her root system to the oak, to the pines, to the entire forest floor. A subterranean web of exchange, of support, of shared nourishment. She was not a solitary note. She was a chord in a root-deep symphony, a final prompting, the gentlest yet. You asked for your place. It is not a point on a map. It is the space you hold. And in a flash of understanding that was less a thought and more a felt truth, she realized it. Her purpose was not to be the tallest. It was to be the shelter. Her strength was not in unchanging rigidity, but in the flexible resilience that allowed birds to land and snow to slide. Her song was not a solo to be sung to the sky, but a bass note in the harmony of the forest, giving depth and foundation. She had spent her life measuring her height against the pines. She had never once measured the warmth in the hollow by her trunk, or the safety in the shadow of her branches, or the life sprouting from her very foot. The spirit did not move, but the 2 points of light seemed to soften with something akin to recognition. It had not given her a gift. It had handed her a mirror that reflected not her needles against the sky, but her roots in the community of the earth. The crushing weight of her loneliness didn't vanish. It transformed. It melted into a profound sense of belonging. The question, why am I here? Quietly dissolved, replaced by a simple, solid fact. I am here. And in this forest, for this fir, that was suddenly, overwhelmingly enough. The discovery had been made. The seed of a new understanding was planted. But as any gardener knows, a seed needs more than soil. It needs the right condition to truly break open and grow. What happens when a soul, having just found its footing, is offered not just insight, but a form of grace? That is where our final chapter begins. Chapter 3. The Quiet Metamorphosis. The understanding that had settled in the fir was not an end. It was a beginning. A new kind of silence descended upon the clearing, a silence shared between her and the spirit. It was not empty, but full of a recognition that needed no words. The spirit did not move to leave. Its form, that gentle vortex of winter's essence, seemed to grow even more still, if that were possible. The 2 points of light that were its gaze rested upon the fir with an infinite patience. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for the internal shift to complete its journey outward. And then, the spirit did the only thing left to do. The simplest, most natural thing in the world. It breathed out. It was not a gust of wind. It was a soft, warm exhalation that carried no sound, only a visible grace. From the core of its being drifted a cloud of luminous particles. Not fireflies, not sparks, but something pure. Like dust motes dancing in a sunbeam, if the sunbeam were made of moonlight and mercy. A shower of gentle, glowing attention. The cloud enveloped the fir not as a blanket, but as a tender acknowledgement. And then the quiet magic began. But it was not a transformation into something new. It was a revelation of what had always been. Her inner fortitude, the quiet strength that had held her upright through every storm of doubt, now crystallized on the very surface of her being. From tip to base, every single needle was sheathed in a layer of dazzling, diamond-bright hoarfrost. It did not weigh her down. It made her sing, a silent, crystalline chime that vibrated in the still air. This was not borrowed glitter. This was her own resilience, made visible. The quiet, heartfelt joy that had begun to bloom in her core, a joy of belonging, of purpose, found now sought expression. At the junctions of her oldest, sturdiest branches, clusters of vibrant ruby-red winter berries swelled into being. They were not decorations, they were affirmations, jewels of life and warmth against the white and silver, proof that profound happiness could grow in the most unexpected soil. And finally, her newfound peace, the deep and settling calm that had replaced the churning disquiet, manifested as the final, perfect touch. Upon the broad plains of her branches, nature laid caps of the most flawlessly soft, untouched snow. They were not a burden, but a crown of tranquility. They spoke of rest, of a journey completed, of a soul that had come home to itself. She did not become a different tree. She became so completely herself that the universe could no longer help but see it. The forest did not change her. It consecrated her. The spirit's lights pulsed once, softly, a silent nod of deep satisfaction. Its work was done. Not the work of a giver, but of a mirror holder. And then, just as it had coalesced, it began to dissolve. Not vanishing, but returning. The swirling mist drifted apart, rejoining the shadows under the pines. The borrowed light returned to the moon. The ancient awareness faded back into the bedrock of the place, leaving behind only a profound, echoing peace. The fir stood, radiant in her own truth. She was still in her clearing, still beside the frozen stream, but nothing was the same. The question was gone. In its place was a fact, solid as her own trunk. I am here, and here is exactly where I belong. Epilogue: The Unfolding Circle. Time in the forest is a gentle wheel. Seasons turned over the fir. She grew not just in size but in presence. Her branches became a sanctuary for generations of birds, her trunk a library of mosses and lichens, her roots a cornerstone of the living network beneath the soil. She was not the tallest, but she became known. A quiet guardian, a fixed point of kindness in the ever-changing woods, and when many winters had passed and her long life reached its natural conclusion, she did not fall with a crash, but settled. She lay down upon the earth that had sustained her with the grace of a fulfilled promise. She returned to the forest floor, becoming shelter for beetles, food for fungi, and soft cradle for new seeds. And the following spring, when the sun grew strong again, a miracle, the quiet, ordinary miracle of life occurred. From the rich humus created by her rest, right beside the memory of her trunk, a circle of young, vibrant fir saplings pushed their bright green heads through the melting snow. They were her legacy, not of name, but of essence, of shelter given, of space held. The circle was unbroken. A final reflection. So, what was this story, if not a tale of a tree and a spirit? It was a story about a question we all carry in some hidden chamber of the heart, the question of our own worth. We are so often like the fir in the first chapter, measuring our height against impossible standards, deaf to the symphony of life thriving in our own shadow. The forest spirit was never an external savior. It was the embodiment of a different kind of attention, the kind we so rarely grant ourselves. Attention without judgment. Attention that asks not, "What are you not?" but "What are you right now in this very space you hold?" The true magic did not begin with the glittering frost or the ruby berries. It began in the moment she looked down, the moment she traded the exhausting search for a distant, idealized role for a deep, grateful recognition of the role she was already, beautifully, living. Her metamorphosis was not about becoming something else. It was the courageous, final act of ceasing to look away from herself. And in that seeing, she found not just acceptance, but a breathtaking, inherent radiance. Sometimes, the most profound journey we can undertake is not toward a distant horizon, but into the quiet center of our own being. To see the shelter we provide, the connections we nurture, the simple, steadfast beauty of our existence. And in that sight, to find a peace that no storm can shake. If stories like this, stories that seek the quiet meaning beneath the surface, resonate with you, then you have found a home here. Consider subscribing to the channel. It is your way of telling the algorithm and me that this space for thoughtful reflection is valued. Together, we can keep exploring the hidden layers of the tales that shape us. Thank you for listening, for sharing this quiet time. May the peace of this forest stay with you. Sweet dreams, dear listener. And may your winter be gentle.